My first two tenets are, number one, education was used as a tool of oppression designed to assimilate and subjugate the indigenous people of this land. This led to resultant ills in terms of intergenerational trauma and dysfunction. I've chosen to use a first aid kit to represent these first two tenets. In many situations, the perceived ills or deficiencies were actually strengths, and in so many instances, the remedies proposed compounded the damage done. The first three artifacts that I have relate to relationship. Number one, I have some latex gloves. In so many respects, Indigenous people were treated with Eurocentric kid gloves in a paternalistic society. This is an example of a pass that was used where Indigenous people had to request through the Indian agent to have passage away from their reserve. The second item I've chosen regarding relationship has to do with the Indian residential school system. And I found this inside the first aid kit, and I feel that the Indian residential schools were rampant with abuse. Children were stripped of their language, their culture, and their family, and it was just a monumental failing by the Canadian government and the religious institutions they were working with. Thirdly, I have a gauze pad. This gauze pad is for wound dressings and cleansing, and I have the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement there. In many cases, this was just a surface wound where money was distributed to survivors of Indian residential schools, whereas so much of the damage was spiritual in nature, and the solutions could have been much more effective. The next three items I have relate to the curriculum. I first used tweezers. I feel that those people who are designing curriculum get to pick and choose what goes in and what goes out, and that self-representation piece has not really been addressed. The next item that I've chosen is this CPR rescue breather, and what I've done there is I've provided a copy of a history textbook that basically makes the suggestions that Europeans came to the rescue of Indigenous people, and it fails to adequately address how important Indigenous knowledge was to Europeans in terms of being able to survive some of the harsh winters and some of the conditions that they were faced with. The next item that I've chosen is an antiseptic, and this is a textbook that I haven't read yet, but it is entitled Lies My Teacher Told Me. And essentially our curriculum, certainly in the province of Ontario, in so many cases has just been whitewashed, where those Indigenous perspectives have been very either absent or very misleading. The next two items that I wanted to talk about relate to systemic issues. So essentially, I have transparent and clear tape. And basically this says that the Royal Commission's report argues that the demeaning and ethnocentric attitude lingers in current policies that purport to work on behalf of Aboriginal peoples. So I know at the federal level we've had a number of changes from Department of Indian Affairs to Aboriginal Affairs to current name changes, but unfortunately this kind of paternalistic attitude stays. And though I do have hope for the future in terms of in finger splints here with people, new teacher candidates being a stabilizing force, unfortunately we are finding that teacher candidates are kind of perpetuating this system of superiority unconsciously in many respects. So this leads me to the final two items that I have. And this relates to some of the outreach work that I've done at the high school. And I mean, this project has allowed me to kind of look at things with a bit of a different lens. This is a Band-Aid, and I feel that some work we had done in the past was essentially a Band-Aid solution. So in 2011, the high school that I was working at raised $7,500 to support the community of Attawapiskat. But I feel that that was just a Band-Aid solution, and I realize now that it's this systemic issues that are really at the core of the work that we need to do in Indigenous education. We moved from sending supplies to communities to a theme of education is the new buffalo, meaning that education is key to the vitality of First Nations Métis people in this country. And so I've chosen to represent this with a cold pack. With the cold pack, we see that there will be some short-term localized relief. And in this case, we supported $2,500 scholarships for Indigenous students at both Mohawk College and McMaster University. But it was just, it was a local solution. It was an individualized solution to help those students. So we need to move forward, and we need to find better solutions. And ultimately, these two quotations really spoke to me. Firstly, you can't be the doctor if you are the disease. So these cures and these fixes have just caused more harm than good. And I'm going to be delighted to tell you about the way forward.